So many people do not know what this is. There are actually 50 million women worldwide going through menopause annually, and that's a lot of women.
Zora Benhamou is a gerontologist on a mission to disrupt menopause stigma and ageist stereotypes. She is the host of the Hack My Age podcast, focusing on biohacking for women going through the menopause transition. She founded the website hackmyage.com and is the author of the Longevity Master Plan and cookbook Eating for Longevity, as well as the creator of online programs for women in peri and post-menopause. She has a master's degree in gerontology from USC, and she graduated summa cum laude. She is also a member of the Gerontological Society of America and Aging Society of America and the European Menopause Andropause Society.
There's some reasons why they go into early menopause. It could be because of surgery, it could be cancer treatments, it could be just genes going wonky. A lot of women and a lot of men, everyone gets confused. What's peri and pre? Those are sort of the major categories. But then you have early onset menopause, which is...
Hi, my name is Chris Burris. I'm a longevity expert and the chief scientist at a lab focused on a longevity molecule. My primary focus is to help people live longer and better lives with science. Make sure to subscribe and share so you and your friends can live longer and better. Well, actually, so you and your friends can live beyond the norms. Welcome to our next talk on Uncovering the Secrets of Longevity, Live Beyond the Norms Health Summit. Our next topic is menopause, and it may surprise you. Menopause is a subject that is near and dear to my heart. This may surprise you because, as you know, I'm a man, and as you also know, menopause is not something that I will ever experience directly. But I can tell you I have experiences with menopause as my wife was going through that transition. In fact, my wife now has a pretty big following on TikTok. She talks about menopause in Spanish. She's originally from Panama. And her channel is called Mujeres Vivaces, which is like vivacious women. We all know the situation where we want to get to the opinion of someone outside of our significant other, right? Like sometimes our significant others aren't the right person that we want to go to, even if they're experts, it turns out. So I'm excited to have a conversation with our next guest. So Zora Benhamou, right? Did I get that right?
Yep.
Is a gerontologist on a mission to disrupt menopause stigma and ageist stereotypes. She is the host of the Hack My Age podcast, focusing on biohacking for women going through the menopause transition. She founded the website hackmyage.com and is the author of the Longevity Master Plan and cookbook Eating for Longevity, as well as the creator of online programs for women in peri and post-menopause. She has a master's degree in gerontology from USC, and she graduated summa cum laude. She is also a member of the Gerontological Society of America and Aging Society of America and the European Menopause Andropause Society. Zora, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. And I'm so excited to talk about menopause with you. And it sounds like, yeah, you're going to know what I'm going to be talking about today.
All right, before we get started, I was hoping that you could share something that would surprise us, basically that nobody knows about you, so we can get to know you.
Well, it's funny because this I have posted as part of my profile, but people still don't get it and they don't understand is that I don't have a home. I'm a nomad. So nomads meaning, when the kids left the home, this was in 2018, and I was an empty nester and my husband as well. We said, okay, let's just sell the car, sell the home, sell the things, and just live a minimalist life, live out of a suitcase. And we just move from country to country every 1 to 4 weeks. We're somewhere new. It's kind of hard to pin me down. But I've been an expat most of my life. So meaning that I stay put for, I don't know, a year, 2, 3, and then move on. So I always say people are either born with wings or roots. And I'm one of those who born with wings. My kids have wings, and not that this is any better or worse. There's advantages and disadvantages to both of them. So that's one thing. I've got so many other things, but if I had to pin one down.
Well, we kind of have that in common to a certain point. My dad was in the Air Force, so I moved every 2 years. So I could certainly, I feel like I could pick up and leave easily. Having said that, I've been in Houston for, I don't know, almost 35 years now. And it feels like home, but there's a part of me that feels like I could move, just at a moment's notice. So I know the draw of what you're doing. Now, let me get, what's your background? What's the background that led you to become a nomadic biohacker?
So the nomadic part is just the wings in me. The biohacking was very much because I was into the health and wellness space. I'm originally from LA, so it's kind of like in your LA DNA to want to be fit and healthy and all that. So that was there. But then my mother died of breast cancer when she was only 57. So then I kind of got a little bit more serious about just not dying early, right? That's just because you thought, well, that's my genetics. And eventually that's led me to health coaching, and that led me to gerontology. And now I have a podcast as well. And a lot of women been asking for information on menopause and hormones. And so all my guests now, we all focus on the menopause piece. I'm 53 myself. So it's kind of like a very natural progression into this biohacking space, which I discovered along the way and just implemented everything I've been picking up. And it fits in perfectly with the gerontology, because gerontology is the study of aging and how people get diseases and why. And we look at the whole life course from birth until death, but we don't only look at the biological side, we look at the psychological and the sociological side and see how those things impact our health and the aging process. And we do focus a lot on older adults and advocate for them and try to talk about social policy and other things as well. But that's sort of, it all just comes together. And I love putting it in a package. And then the nomad piece, I mean, this is so exciting for me to be traveling and seeing how people are aging around the world. I've been doing this all my life, but now that I have the menopause background, I love to interview women around the world and see how different cultures and how women from different cultures are dealing with menopause. And so that's sort of all of that comes together in just my whole life course itself.
I feel like we could go down a rabbit hole of interesting conversations that you've had with all of your expat experiences, but that sounds like something over a glass of wine more than this podcast. I do have a very stupid sense of humor, so I have to ask, why is it menopause and not womenopause?
I know. There's one woman who answered the question, what's menopause? And she says, well, it's a pause on the men because of low libido, some of these symptoms we get. And I was like, oh, that's an interesting way to put it. But it's meno because of the word menstruation, or which comes from the Greek moon or month. And then the pause is that pause in your menstruation in that period. But to me, it's not paused. I mean, it's not coming back. I mean, it'll be paused during the perimenopause transition where it comes and it goes and it comes and goes. But once you're in menopause, that one date where you have 12 consecutive months without a period, it's pretty much the stop button is on, not pause. It's called menostop.
Yeah, it's the menostop. I love that you say that menopause is inevitable, but suffering is optional. Let's start with the basics. What are the stages of menopause? What are people experiencing as they go through those stages of menopause?
It's so good you ask, because so many people do not know what this is, women themselves. So don't feel guilty if you're a woman listening to this and you have no idea what to expect. There are actually 50 million women worldwide going through menopause annually, or going into menopause. That's 12 months. And in the US alone, every day, 6,000 women are going to hit menopause. And that's a lot of women. And so menopause is literally a one-day event, but we use it to describe the whole experience, the perimenopause, which is about 5 years more or less before you hit that date of 12 consecutive months without a period. Then there's post-menopause, and it's all encompassing. So when we say menopause, we generally talk about that whole experience, but technically it's a one-day event. So perimenopause, as I just mentioned, it could be 5, sometimes 10 years of hormonal fluctuations where your periods come, then they go, then you start to have some of the symptoms, but you still have a period. So you're not quite hit menopause. So a lot of women don't know what's going on at this stage because they don't expect menopause. And it usually happens around the age of 40, in your mid 40s. So when you're in your mid 40s, you're not thinking about menopause. You're going, oh, that's somebody who's 50, 60. It's not really on the radar, but it really should be. And this is what I'm trying to do, is bring awareness to that, because when you're in this perimenopause experience, you may go to the doctor with all your symptoms and they have just give you an antidepressant, or they give you some sleep medication, or they're trying to cover the symptoms, but yet without really addressing the root cause, which could be your hormonal imbalances. And then there is post-menopause, which is anything after that menopause date. And then a lot of women and a lot of men, everyone gets confused. What's peri and pre, right? They say premenopause and perimenopause is the same thing, but they're different. Peri means around, right? The time around the menopause, which is usually the 5 to 10 years. And premenopause is pretty much when you get your period, which I don't know, around the age of 12, more or less, and until you hit perimenopause, which is generally your mid 40s. So those are sort of the major categories. But then you have early onset menopause, which is could be early 40s, and that's just the egg stopping because you're losing your sex hormones, and it's just a little bit earlier, because 45, the average age of menopause is 51, which I should have mentioned. That's when you have hit that date. The 51 is the normal age. So around 45, 46 is when you hit perimenopause. Then if you hit menopause in the early 40s, then that's just called early onset menopause. A little bit earlier than normal. It happens. It's common. It's not unusual at all. So ladies, be aware of this. If you're in your early 40s, you got to think about menopause. And then there's premature menopause, which is menopause before the age of 40, so in your 30s or less. And that's about 1% of the women in the US have that. So it's not a big number. And then anything under the age of 30, yes, women can hit menopause under 30, and that's called ovarian failure. And that is 0.1% of the population. So it's quite rare, but it can happen. And so women do have, there's some reasons why they go into early menopause. It could be because of surgery. It could be, they call it surgical menopause. It could be cancer treatments. It could be just genes going wonky. And that's, doctors can hopefully get you back on track, but sometimes it just happens.
Excellent. So we've got pre-menopause, which is really just the kind of the fertile years, right? Like, we'll just call it that. And then we've got perimenopause, where you're getting into it, and that's where the pause actually applies. And then you've got actual menopause, or post-menopause is the 1 day, which is 12 months after your last period. And then you've got post-menopause, which is just the rest, right? Everything that happens after menopause.
Yes, you've been listening. Yeah. You get an A+.
And taking notes, because if I don't take notes, I'm really good at taking notes and then just reading my notes back.
Yeah, well done.
And on average, menopause, that event is at age 51. So that's when it happens. And then you start talking about.
That's in the U.S., in general, in North America, because there are countries, I think it's India, for example, it happens at about 48. And there are countries in other cultures that happen a little bit later. So just so you know, there's
some variability there. Yeah, cultural variability. And then you start talking about, it happens at the 40s. I feel like it caught my wife off guard. I was going to say, you're kind of first, as you were talking, you're saying, hey, if you're not aware of this, like, don't be surprised. You're not the only one. And I think that's why my wife's channel is really popular, because she's talking about something that nobody's talking about. And then, people are having hot flashes, and there's all sorts of sympathy and empathy in this environment, right? That social media channel. And it's just because it's like, well, they don't have anyone else to talk to. That's kind of some of what I feel, as well as it's just top of mind. But as you get into ovarian failure at 30, I don't know where this sits. I think there's a lot of this starts just my own mind goes to, okay, I know couples are having children much later in life, right? And if you're at risk of getting ovarian failure, which could be, could be just really early of a natural process or detrimental effects. That's why it's called failure instead of just a phase of menopause. Like you've got to be careful about when you're going to have children. That may not be the audience that's checking this out, but maybe their children are this audience. Because I know I've had conversations with my wife, and we actually had some fertility help with our children. We have twins, and I think there's a lot of people out there who are like, I'm just going to push it off and I'll do it later. And then later is significantly tougher than people think. I don't know if you ever get into those conversations.
You're right. It's a good conversation to have. I don't talk a whole lot about it because it is such a small percentage of people that happen. So, but yeah, to be aware. And in fact, I think because of the changes in our society, at least in our Western society, where women are delaying pregnancy, there are a whole lot more incentives to freeze your eggs. And, we want to have careers and we want to do things and we want to be independent. And if you take good care of yourself, well, you should be able to be in a good condition for a long time. And so it's almost like having a whole nother life after a certain age. And I mean, I think the midlife is in the age of 50s. People used to be dying and sick and falling apart, and now we're living into our 80s and now approaching 90s, and it's not so unusual anymore. So if we are, then imagine a woman going through menopause in your mid 40s and you live until 90. Well, half your life you're going to be in menopause, right? I mean, so and I think that there's not enough research, there's not enough studies, on women, period, and forget women going through who are older. So there's got to be a bit more research to figure out, well, how can we keep these women in a good condition, but also what is it about menstruation and periods and menopause, and why do we stop, and et cetera, et cetera. And we'll see if this evolves and changes, because historically, because women were dying in much earlier. The way I understood, I just did a little research on menopause in like hundreds of years ago, and women were getting menopause in their early 40s, late 30s, and so now it seems to be bumping up. Now, okay, now we're mid 40s. Are we going to evolve and then start hitting menopause closer to our mid 50s? I don't know, but it's a good question to have, because if you are planning children and planning a family and planning your life, then you need to be aware of, wow, if your periods stop and you're not fertile anymore, then what do you do, right?
Yeah. That's a challenging situation to get pregnant with, right? Like that dramatically decreases is an understatement. So what are the health risks as somebody's going through menopause? Like symptoms, hot flashes, I know, because my wife was just constantly like, is it hot in here? It's like, it wasn't hot 10 seconds ago and it's hot. You didn't see me mess with the thermostat. What else is there, and what are the actual concerns? I think a heat flash is extremely irritating, but I'm not so sure. And maybe it is a health concern. What are the concerns?
So there's the ones that stand out most is when women think, okay, men as well, you're going to hit menopause when you stop having periods and you start getting hot flashes and night sweats, right? So those are clearly menopause related. Everything else, it could be menopause, it could be something else, it could be so many things, symptoms of other things. So you're sleeping poorly. Well, if you're having night sweats, you're probably going to sleep poorly. But poor sleep could be a symptom of so many other things as well. The unexplained weight gain. Diet, exercise hasn't changed yet. You're getting this belly fat. Anxiety, depression as well. This is a very common symptom, and a very, very frustrating one as well. Brain fog, cognitive decline, your memory declines, and you go, oh, this is just aging or normal aging. Well, it's not normal aging. Okay. It happens and it's common, but could it be the hormones? Could it be, again, is this a sign of a disease that's coming on? Who knows, right? So, but just to be aware, because you could correct a lot of these things as well, quite easily. There's moodiness, there's low libido, vaginal dryness or vaginal atrophy, there's the tender breasts, there's joint pain, the skin issues we have that are clear, and then some pelvic floor issues, incontinence, osteoporosis is obviously a big one. So many symptoms that we are related to menopause. So those, just look out for those. And there's like 100 of them. Okay. I'm just listing the most common ones that people should be aware of.
Well, I can tell you that I was just checking it off that's, yes, my wife did experience each of those and continues to experience some of them. All right. So what can we do? What can we do to lower these risks, these symptoms?
So the risks and symptoms are a bit different. So when you go through the menopause experience and with this loss of hormones, you are at more risk of so many diseases because you're depleted, you're hormone poor, right? So you're at more risk of cardiovascular disease. You're at more risk of diabetes. You're more risk of thyroid problems, dementia, arthritis, the vaginal atrophy, all these other things. So you kind of go, oh, wow, okay, I don't want to put myself at risk, right? And there's even an interesting study of women's health across the nation that found that women who have hot flashes earlier on in the menopause experience also seem to have higher risk for some of these diseases as well. So we want to kind of delay, if we can, some of these things. And so how do we fix it? Well, we biohack it with healthy diet and lifestyle, but there's many, many things that we can do. So if you're talking about heart disease, okay, because heart disease is, as you know, I'm sure, is the number one killer of both men and women around the world. And we tend to associate heart attacks with men or overweight men. And in fact, that's totally wrong. And we would think, oh, cancer or breast cancer is the first thing on a woman's mind. And breast cancer is way lower risk than heart disease and having a heart attack and a stroke. So women need to be just as concerned about heart disease as they are about cancer. So when you want to lower the risk for heart disease when you're going through menopause, one of my favorite biohacks is to consider bioidentical hormone therapy. It's one of those things that have shown so far in the research that it is lowering the risk of heart disease. However, if you were to go to a menopause society, some of these menopause associations, they don't yet say this is conclusive. So you have to be a little bit careful when you're talking about things like cancer and heart disease. They would be conclusive for osteoporosis, for example. This is by clearly working. But if you're just talking about hot flashes, for example, that across the board, it does the trick really fast for most women. And when you are considering bioidentical hormones, you've got to go do this with your doctor for sure, because you're messing around with your hormones. And although it could be such a miracle for you and relieve you from some of these symptoms and put you at lower risk for some of these diseases, it's a whole artwork of how to do it. But it is amazing because I call this menopause support therapy, right? This is just the word hormone. Women have been so and doctors as well, so scarred by this Women's Health Initiative study from 2002 it's been completely debunked, but everyone thought, oh, hormones cause cancer because of this study. And when actually what happened was the study was stopped midway because there were some women who were getting cancer. But since then, the headlines made it too quickly before the actual analysis of the study was done. So when it was actually done, and then there was follow-up study in 2017, they were showing that these women were actually, the majority of the women were actually at lower risk and protected and all this from all these diseases. And so in fact, there was just too many loopholes with this study. I'm not going to go into it right now. I want to, but I can't. I'm gonna hold myself. But since then, I'm just a big proponent of considering hormone therapy. Exercise, of course, is a fabulous way to lower your heart disease. When you're going through menopause, it's not this chronic cardio, not running all day long, right? Because that's a stress on your body. And so we prefer things like a HIIT training, appropriate cardio load. And we don't want to, like, the small bursts are also really good. We want to get the right nutrition, getting your omega-3s in there with fish or seafood and flax seeds and things like that, getting enough fiber for that. Stress management. We're still talking about heart disease and lowering the risk of heart disease, but all these things that I'm telling you now is to hit every single symptom of menopause as well. So it goes across the board. So when I talk about stress management, you take your pick. There's thousands out there. The most common ones are the meditation, the breath work, the yoga. If you're in the biohacking space, there's like apps, like Newcom or Brain Tap and these gadgets we wear. They're so cool. If you need a little bit more motivation to get there, or if you like the data, take a vacation. Some of these things, removing toxic people from your life will probably help your stress management, and just a ton of things that we can do. Supplements, and if you want to lower the risk of the heart disease, I don't know if you heard of SPMs.
No.
They're specialized pro-resolving mediators, and what they do is they switch off this secondary inflammatory process. So the first one we need, right? We don't want to shut down inflammation completely, because inflammation is a good thing. We need it for certain responses, right? So SPMs are one of those sort of newer things that people are talking about in terms of lowering inflammation. And of course, that's when you're in this longevity space and anything, we want to keep inflammation low, but we want to have that initial response. And so that's what SPMs do. And then there's Fatty 15. Have you heard of that?
Hey, super quick break from the podcast. Hopefully you're loving it. This is a way you can support the podcast and take advantage of a great offer. We're offering 50% off of one of our MCT bottles. MCT is an amazing oil. Add the ESS60 molecule to it. It's even more amazing. All you got to do is leave a review on iTunes, send us a notification that you've left that review. We'll get you a coupon code that'll get you 50% off of our MCT oil and free shipping. Back to the podcast. I have heard of Fatty 15. I haven't tried it, but I would say I'm all about it, but I haven't tried it, and I heard of it at the Biohacking conference. So that's a shame on me.
Yeah, no, it's a new omega 15. Like people talk about omega 3, 6, 9, and not many people talk about omega 15, and that's something new that people can kind of look at in terms of managing the heart disease. And then when you talk about diabetes, insulin resistance, because that happens a lot with women who are going through this transition with the loss of hormones. We just can't seem to eat the foods that we normally used to eat without gaining weight. You're like, what is it? Look at a pizza practically, and you just gain 5 pounds. And that doesn't make any sense, because other things haven't really changed in your life. So what women tend to do is exercise more and eat less. And then they just get in this vicious cycle. They're not getting enough calories and all that. So that's partly due because the insulin resistance, and one of the biohacking things that we love is to wear those continuous blood glucose monitors. That's you slap it on the back of your arm. They're quite simple. It gives you 2 weeks of data, and that'll give you a very personalized assessment of where you're at and what you should eat, shouldn't eat. It shows you how stress affects your blood sugar levels too, because even though you've say been in a fasted state, if you have a stressful event in your life, or somebody just almost hit you by a car, or you had a horrible argument with your partner or something, you can see that blood sugar rise and fall. So that just gives you a very interesting visual of how do I control blood sugar, right? And people always think it's the food. It's not always the food, it's your stress. And then you can play around with it and exercise and, before a meal, after a meal, and see how you can control that. If women are snacking a lot, you'll see a lot of spikes, ups and downs, and that doesn't really do anything for your diabetes or insulin resistance. So you may want to leave more space in between meals. Peptides are really interesting for hacking blood sugar, like the GLP-1 agonists, Ozempic, tirzepatide. You've probably heard of those, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. So those are those weight loss peptides, and they work because they work on your blood sugar levels. And then of course there's supplements like berberine, dihydroberberine, myoinositol, psyllium husk can help as well. And then the drug metformin, right? I'm sure you've talked about this with some of your guests, the longevity or the anti-aging drug metformin. And that's a sort of first action that doctors take with people who have diabetes. But now we're playing around with it ourselves, even without diabetes. Have you tried metformin yet?
Yeah, and in fact, one of the individuals that I interviewed, who is very papered, he's a physician out of New Zealand, Dr. Stanfield. Very like, this is the literature and I only go by the peer reviewed public, right? So I think you and I are more biohackers and we're like, that sounds like a good idea, right? And we're okay. We do want some research. We definitely want to be aware of the research and we want to mitigate any risks. But we're also, I just don't require that everything I take has the minimum, the standard is 2 double-blind, peer-reviewed, placebo-controlled studies. Like they're just not available on so many things. And he's very much a stickler. And his stance, he used to take metformin. His stance is that when they brought the studies into humans, that it didn't have the same effects that they were expecting. And then you couple that with and it's a small deleterious effect on, if you work out and you're taking metformin, your muscle gains are slightly reduced, right? So I think it's in the order of, I don't know, I'll say 5 to 15%. It's a big range, but I'll give that. And he also said that it has a negative impact on your VO2 max. So even your cardiovascular gains are mitigated if you're taking metformin. So he's laid off. I also had another interview talking about metformin and that it's actually really good for supporting akkermansia, right, in your gut biome, which is apparently a really important one. And there's one company that makes it. I'm hoping to have an interview with them, and just to support that is good. But if akkermansia is good for you, what we know is and I don't remember the specific details when they brought the trials into humans. I think it was, I don't remember what it was. So let me not make something up there. But you would hope that akkermansia, if that's so valuable, maybe you don't have the deleterious effect on the physical gains. But so that's a very long answer for yes. And still want to I need to go back and listen to that interview again, actually. And I want to follow up. What is the one paper? Because if you have a slight reduction in gains and you're doing a lot of work, then that may be acceptable. Given what potential there is. I mean, just the fact that people with type 2 diabetes who take metformin outlive their non-diabetic counterparts, like that seems like a home run.
Yeah.
But just like so many things in this space, often there just aren't home runs, right? Like and these concerns are there. I don't know if you've kind of looked into those aspects of metformin.
Yes, no, those are the ones that make the headlines. And so I haven't tried it myself, but I'm all about bioindividuality and telling people to experiment on themselves. Who knows, right? Of course, there's risks and you got to talk to your doctor about that and see what works for you. But if the benefits outweigh the risks or some of the downsides, I mean, it's kind of a no-brainer. Go try it with your doctor's consent, and then we'll see what happens. Because just like anything, it may or may not work for you. Who knows, right? Just because one study, I tell my clients when I was health coaching a lot more, it just said, they'd come to me with these saying, "Oh, maybe I should start sauna use because I can extend my lifespan by 7 years or so." And you go, well, okay, the study was done on 50-year-old Finnish men, and you're a 38-year-old Chinese woman. Try it. Maybe it will work. I don't know. Just because the one study says that this is this great result doesn't mean it's going to work for you. I mean, we'll find out when you die. It's you
maybe.
Right? You got to take these with a grain of salt when you read studies as well. So I think it's important, and we need the research, and we need to have some guidance as well. But don't put all your faith and go, this is going to work for me because study says, or my friend said, or it worked for my husband, or like whatever. But just
So one of the key things you mentioned was bioidentical hormones, and a couple things, into my just extremely logical but probably not biological brain are, do you potentially want to start bioidentical hormones like as soon as you start seeing some declines in your hormone levels? And can that actually extend the perimenopause, or even extend out the actual menopause time? Like, what is the potential impact there? Is there any data on that?
I haven't seen any data on terms of can it extend the periods, but from just anecdotal information, when women tend to go on their bioidentical hormone therapy, they get their periods back. We're like, oh, it's back. But is
that was my next question.
Yeah, and it's been gone for 8 months and then suddenly comes back. But is that due to the bioidenticals or not? It's kind of hard to say. So I'd have to go dive a little bit deeper into that. But there is some research showing that delaying the menopause is actually protective. So it's probably a good thing, but there's not enough conclusive evidence for that. Again, this is such a new field. I think we still have so much work to do. But I think that, I just did a post yesterday with Dr. Elizabeth Yorth, and she, the little reel that I said was that there was a Stanford study that she was quoting that said the women in this study who started hormone therapy earlier were at less risk for cardiovascular disease. And so she was saying we should do this earlier. And in fact, there are plenty of women I know now personally who they test the hormones of their 20-year-olds and they find out they're a little bit low in progesterone. So then they just top them up with a little bit of progesterone. So it's not necessarily for menopause women only. And to help with those menopause symptoms, women throughout our lives, we have fluctuations in hormones when we're going through puberty, when we get pregnant, when we get menopause, and everything in between. And so if replenishing your hormones or topping them up or balancing them out, whatever it is, no matter what age, I think it's something to consider and talk to your doctor about, because wow, what a simple way to improve your health and to feel better, to perhaps extend your lifespan. Because when you think about it, it may not be directly affecting your lifespan in that sense. Oh, you take hormones and live longer. It may indirectly, in the sense that, wow, you're finally getting sleep. When you sleep, and you're actually getting recovery, or you're actually going through that glymphatic drainage system where brain is getting there all shampooed out, and a lot of benefits are happening when you're getting good sleep and when you're happy and when when you're balanced, and you can finally exercise more because you're not sleep deprived. I mean, it's just this cycle that may start with the hormones, but because of many other things that are happening after you take the hormones and feel better, that has the direct impact on your lifespan and health span.
It's interesting, because my next question was going to be like, if you start the bioidentical hormone replacement after your period has stopped, does it come back? And it does come back, and that it can come back. And that actually reminds me, and I find this absolutely fascinating. Our biggest distributor here in Houston is a woman who was full on menopause, right? So after menopause, and she shared with me that her cycle had started up when she started taking our product. So I find that fascinating. I don't have any data on, impacts on hormones or whatever with our product, but it's a youthful result, I think, right? If we're replacing the hormones and the cycle come back, in this case, the cycle came back without the hormone replacement, then it's kind of a youth supplement. It's just, I find that stuff fascinating. So I know in men it's testosterone, right? So you can do testosterone replacement, and there are some side effects, right? I mean, the one that comes to my mind is probably not, it's not, we probably wouldn't call it a health side effect, but man boobs can happen if you're on testosterone. Are there side effects for bioidentical hormone replacement for women?
Well, you want to get the hormones balanced and right. Anything you do, there's a risk. I mean, if you eat a certain food, there's a risk. If you don't eat a certain food, there's a risk. If there's a medication, hormones, it's all there's nothing that's 0% risk and guaranteed. So I always think that anything you do, especially if you have a condition, you got to talk to your doctor. But what was the original question? The risk,
the side effects, right?
Oh, yeah. Side effects.
The risk of potential side effects.
Yeah. So some women. So I'm going through this very interesting course right now with the Institute of Bioidentical Medicine, and it's a training program for doctors. I'm not a doctor, but they allowed me to take the program, and so what we're learning is that generally this is the information they've given me, that a woman comes into say 100 women go into the doctor's office and they all say we want to have hormones. 25% of those women will have their cocktail just right, where they feel better, symptoms are gone, and they are in this optimal window of not too much, not too little. In fact, if a woman is a little too happy with her progress and actually too elated, they're warning the doctors, she may have a little bit too much estrogen. You may want to take it down. You want to, look at the numbers, test her, obviously, and see if she's in this optimal window also to protect her bones, to protect her heart, to protect her brain. So just because you've resolved the symptoms doesn't mean, oh, the more the better. Oh, let's give her more of this stuff or things like that. So there is very interesting that only 25. So that means they're asking the doctors to tell their patients directly, you're going to need about 3 consecutive sessions with me month to month, because one, we're going to probably give you the hormones. Like if they want it, they have to educate them. They have to see, they give them the first dosage. Then the month after that, they are going to set up a test as well. They may need extra blood tests or urine tests. They get that back. And then they have the second follow-up. How you doing? How you feeling? And then let's look at the data. And then the third follow-up may be, if they need it, is okay, because then 75% of the women need to have their hormones tweaked. Right. So then if you're tweaking it, then you got to meet again in the next month and say, okay, how are you feeling now? And if you still haven't found the right tweak, you got to come in for the fourth. So in fact, it's not just you go in, get your hormones gone, and I'll see you in a year. There's not only want you to feel better, they also want to test you to make sure that you're in the right zone and not at risk for anything else of too low hormones or too high. Because when the doctors are retesting them, then they find out that those other 75% either have too little or too much, or an unbalance of the hormone. So I think that is very interesting, and it's very vital for that a woman knows, and she goes in there, gets the information if she's considering hormone therapy, talk about the risks, the benefits, et cetera, and be 100% confident with her decision. Don't let anyone bully you into taking hormones if you don't feel comfortable with it, or if your doctor's not giving you hormones, which is more the case, if you're pretty convinced like this is an amazing thing and I got to get on it, and your doctor says, no, you're not, it's typical, you're not in menopause yet. When you hit menopause, we will consider giving you hormone therapy. Meanwhile, you're struggling through the whole perimenopause experience, waiting for your period to go away before you can start to get something that makes you feel better. And that's, to me, wrong, but it just happens all the time. So really find that doctor who is trained in menopause, please, because I just spoke to somebody yesterday who the doctor wasn't really trained and said, okay, I'll give you this stuff if you want. And the patient said, well, is this a bioidentical or is it synthetic? And the doctor's like, I don't know what you're talking about. And I said, you got to go find another doctor, because that doctor, and in the end, he turned out to be synthetic. She gave me the name. And I said, I can see in your face that you have doubt and you're worried. And if you're rubbing this cream on your body with the negative thoughts that this is going to give me cancer or some horrible disease, like, because you still are not educated. That's what it's going to do. Yeah, you're not educated. You don't understand. Then, you're putting yourself at risk. Don't take that. I mean, you got to be informed, and the doctor has to be informed, because you can't be, again, just playing around with this stuff.
So you mentioned a cocktail. So it's progesterone, right? And progesterone and estrogen. Is there any testosterone kind of mixed in there? What are?
Yeah. So when we take estrogen, there are 3 main estrogens. There's others as well, but that we talk about during in a women's health, and that's estrone, which is E1, estradiol, which is E2, and estriol, which is E3. But the 2 main estrogens that women generally get is estriol, and that's for oftentimes vaginal atrophy. We get dry as a desert down there, and sex is painful. Then you can't have a normal relationship, and everything goes in the hill, and that's no fun. So we would tend to get that. And anyways, being well lubricated is good sexual health. And then we get estradiol.
And just good health in general. I would imagine being well lubricated is actually, like, that's part of the natural function of the vagina. So, like, that's good in and of itself, whether you're having a sex life, which you definitely want to have.
Absolutely.
Like,
yeah. I think, you don't want to miss out. I mean, some women are that when you got low libido, last thing on your mind is sex. I mean, it's dry there. Yep. Sex is painful. I mean, I get it. Like, why would you want to have sex if it's just like that? And so it's very often pushed to the side, your relationships, the sexual intimacy. You're like, I just don't, but it is so important. It is so important to not only, it's not only for, okay, let's be happy and have fun and all that, but it's your sexual health, right? There's so many other things that are going on in your reproductive system that is important for your longevity and aging. But man, if you're in a relationship and your partner is got higher libido than you, is that going to be okay for the next 30, 40 years that you just, put sex to the side and that partner is okay with that? Usually not. I mean, if you're at the same, if you both have low libido and you're happy and fine, like that's your life, go for it. But it's not often the case. So I would say don't ignore that, because you've got a partner there who loves you, hopefully, and is watching you going through this experience and doesn't know what to do. They know even less than you may. And so, work on that relationship. Having an intimate life is so rewarding, and it's nice to have someone go through that with you. And I mean, there's people who prefer to be alone. That's fine too. I'm not saying this is the be all end all, but most of us, we're social, humans are social beings, and we like that. And so the other thing that helps actually with the dryness and the libido is, so there's the estriol is great for that, but also having sex itself is good. But I would tell women to give yourself time and tell your partner you need time for arousal and blood flow and the juices to flow. It's not just let's get it done. And when you allow the juices to flow and that natural lubrication, because you can use something you find at the pharmacy or some moisturizers, lubricants, but getting your own flow, you can do it. Just give yourself time, right? That's the foreplay that we seem to have lost, especially in a long marriage. and sometimes, your partner has to be patient. Give yourself time and make time for sex and intimacy and all that. So that will get your own natural juices going, and a little bit of estriol too. But so those, I totally sidetracked. So yeah, estriol, estradiol, the two main ones you'll probably get from a doctor. And you always want to take that with progesterone. You don't want to take just estrogen alone. And then if your doctor is a little bit more advanced, they'll look at testosterone, because we do lose testosterone as well. And that is so important. Also for the libido, also for muscle building, also for so many other functions in the body. It's not just for those two main ones. Those are the main ones we always talk about. But having those in balance, wow, you just supercharged. And it, again, our testosterone is just a teeny tiny amount compared to what a man's dosage would be. So the dosages are much smaller, and that's why you usually need to get it compounded in a compounded pharmacy and made specially for you. They have, at least in Europe, where I spent a lot of time, if you were to go into the pharmacy, it's just, no, you couldn't get the man dosage, done, here you go. It's quite huge and no problem. But once you get to a woman coming to the counter, they're like, okay, this has to be a special formula for you. The rest of the stuff you can get, so the different people who are maybe a little confused between compounded and prescribed, right? Compounded means that your doctor is sending a percentage, that formula that wants to be made, kind of tailor-made for you in a laboratory. And then it's usually a cream or a gel, and you rub that on yourself. The pharmaceutical one, or the prescribed one, is you go to the pharmacy and you have your prescription, and it's all there, and it's FDA approved. They know exactly what's in there. So there's a little bit of debate on what is better for you, because they're both bioidentical, right? There's also still synthetic in the pharmacy. You just want to make sure you get the bioidentical stuff. but the compounded one is not regulated by the FDA. So some doctors are like, I don't know if they're going to, they haven't checked out the pharmacy completely. They're not sure if the exact dosage is what it is. And so they feel that it's a little bit risky. Some doctors are like, nope, I know that pharmacy every time. I got great results with all my patients. And, if they trust it, then that should be fine. And then other doctors, so you can see why some doctors may just want the prescribed one, which is totally fine too. So that's some of the differences.
But stay away from the synthetic, right? Like I think that's
away.
something that was an undertone and is worth stating emphatically.
Yes, because I think that's what came from the Women's Health Initiative study. They were doing synthetic estrogen, which is, and Premarin, what's called Premarin is they still sell it, which I don't understand why. And hormones derived from horse urine, which we don't know anymore because we're not a horse. We can have now bioidenticals that are identical to our own body. Sometimes they're called body identicals. So really, you want to make sure that you're going with that as well, because the synthetic. I don't know why they still sell this, but Anyways, I do want to mention a little bit something interesting. Some women are so afraid of hormones these days, but when it comes to, say, birth control, that's synthetic. And we're prescribing that like no tomorrow, and you're taking it. You probably took it when you were younger. And so, why are we so...
For years.
Yeah, for years and not decades. And yet we're afraid of menopause hormones therapy. So that just to me doesn't make any sense.
That's a great comparison. I think that's a great way to kind of wrap up the subject. I've got a couple of wrap up questions. So let's start with, do you have a target age that you want to live to?
I would say, I'm going to live to 100, probably at least. And that's my goal. But it doesn't, when I say that, I say it that, of course, I'm going to live in a good condition and I'm going to have enough money. Right? Because if I'm going to live longer, I need money. And if I need money, then I have to work. And if I have to work, then I have to be in a good condition. Right? So I'd rather die earlier if I'm not going to have those things. So, and be a burden on people. So that's sort of, I don't care what the number is. I just want to be in good condition and have finances to not be a burden on people.
I like that. And how long do you think humans can live?
Do you mean now or in the future?
Both, right? So I guess the question is really like, do you believe there's an upper limit? Because I think there's a lot of people, maybe more in the medical community and maybe in general, believe like that the limit is 125 or whatever it is. And David Sinclair is obviously kind of with his information theory of aging has said that it actually could be infinite. Like we could outlive forever. Where do you sit on that spectrum?
I know it's those are the radical longevity enthusiasts like Aubrey de Grey, and they say we can live to 1,000 or infinite and all that. And I think we need those dreamers. We need those people to push the limits. And why limit ourselves, right? We need it just all through history and invention that because these people who dream like that. And maybe it's possible, maybe it's not. I don't know. And I don't know if I'll live to the day to see that. I mean, we know because of Jean-Louise Calment, the woman in France, she lived to 122. So, okay, that's the longest living person so far. I think in the near future, definitely the 130s should be achievable. But where do I lie in the spectrum? I don't delve into that world of the radical longevity world to understand, to really be convinced. So it's a kind of a hard question to ask. So, but my question is always no matter how long you are, you need to question yourself what life will be like if you have no friends living as long as you do. Your family all died, you have no money, and you're in poor health. That's assuming if that's the case, then really who does want to live to 1,000? But if everyone is, and your family and your friends, well, then what's going to happen to the world? Like the population, we're going to have to go to live on Mars or something. I mean, there's so many questions that I haven't yet looked into, but I know that they're there to be able to answer that question properly.
I think at a minimum, it's a fascinating topic. All right. So what are 2 to 3 protocols, habits, mindsets, let's call them shortcuts, because everybody likes shortcuts, that you would share regarding longevity and a long health span?
So have you heard of the Harvard study of adult development?
Maybe.
It's
It doesn't ring a bell.
It's one of the longest longitudinal studies on adults ever. It started in 1938. It's still ongoing.
I have heard of it.
Right?
Yes. Keep going.
Yeah. And so it started off with Harvard students, men only, and then eventually went on to their wives and their offspring. And it's a fascinating study because, of course, they started in the beginning with just questionnaires and blood tests and whatever they had, and then moved on to MRIs and gene testing, and they asked them so many questions and looked at all their cholesterol levels and their blood work and so many things, MRIs, and then they concluded. I can't remember if it was like 2017 or somewhere. What is it that's making people live better, longer, happier? And what they concluded, more than smoking and exercise and their cardiovascular measures, the thing that made them live better, longer was strong, healthy relationships. Basically, yeah, what makes you happy? And that was mind-blowing. More than, it's not that exercise and smoking are not, it's important. We need to look at those things, but this seemed to have a slightly bigger impact than everything else. So it does show. So one of my favorite hacks is to work on nurturing your network, strengthening your relationships. And it doesn't have to be like I'm married or have a husband or a wife. It can be your friends. It can be your family. It can be, you just want that strong relationship. It makes you feel secure. It makes you feel safe. If someone's got your back, if you fell down and couldn't get up or things like that, if you lost all your money, you've got someone who can help you get back up again. These sort of things that make us feel safe. And I think that's really important. And it doesn't mean that everything's happy, lucky all the time. And these people can fight, and you can have, this is part of relationship. It's just that, when shit hits the fan, that person will be there for you. And even if you don't agree on everything. So it's really important, I would say, to work on those relationships. And it's a little harder for men than it is for women, because your social network seems to revolve around work. And if once you quit, then their social life seems to stop, and you kind of rely on the wife if it's or your other partner who's maybe more social. But generally in gerontology, we learn about those things, and so that's why it's really important to learn how to socialize if we just relied on those relationships at work, and work on that. So that's my number one favorite shortcut to longevity.
All right. Do you have a 2? The other two, I'd say, because I'm in the menopause space, I'd say the bioidentical hormones are one of my favorite, because you don't need to suffer, really. And even if you've sailed through menopause, this is one of the myths, is you did go through menopause. It's not like, some women go, I didn't get menopause. No, of course you don't have a period anymore, and you are definitely in menopause, but a lot of things that go on under the hood. So I want you to look at your bone density. I want you to get your blood work done. I want you to still look at your hormones. And just because you don't feel bad doesn't mean that things aren't really happening and you're not optimized. And I don't want to scare people, into, now I'm, there are people who are hypochondriacs in here listening. That's not good for them to hear this, but I don't want people to either just kind of wait until something's broken and then try to fix it either. So, bioidentical hormones help with it, and protects your heart, protects your brain. It protects you from breast cancer. People who are on the hormone therapy tend to be at lower risk, have fewer cases. So it's again very individualized. I don't want people to just go and there are some women who are not candidates who shouldn't be on hormone therapy, but the majority of women can be, and it'll just make your life so much happier and better. Excellent. And Zora, how can people contact you?
Hack My Age. You can find everywhere on hackmyage.com, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. I've got a Facebook group, Biohacking Menopause. Everything else is Hack My Age. So they're very easy to find me.
Excellent. And what is something in the near future that you're excited about?
The normalization of this discussion around menopause. It's so taboo still. And I love it that men are talking about it too, because even on I have programs online that I sell for women going through the perimenopause and menopause. And I've had men buy this program and for the group sessions. And I told them, I'm like, God, I'm sorry. I don't think I can let you in these Zoom sessions because women are quite intimate. We don't talk. And if you see a man there and they're like, no, it's not for me. It's for my wife. I want to help her. And I just thought that was so beautiful. So I love that we're talking about it. And I want more women and men to be talking about it, and I want children to be talking about it. And I'm excited also for more research in menopause, because what I say today may change tomorrow. So like, who knows? And that's why we do need more research. But for what we have now, I'm feeling, pretty positive about certain things.
Well, Zora, I've so much enjoyed this conversation. You can find her at hackmyage.com, hackmyage on the social channels. There's a Facebook group, Biohacking My Menopause. Is that right?
Biohacking Menopause.
Just Biohacking Menopause. Oh, it's not it's me writing ing. Biohacking Menopause. Zora, this has been such a great conversation. Thank you for joining us today.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm excited to hear everyone else's interviews.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Live Beyond the Norms podcast. Make sure to subscribe and follow. Also, make sure not to be that guy, the guy sharing this podcast with people who are not interested in living beyond the norms. If you would like to learn more about the ESS60 molecule, the molecule responsible for the single longest longevity experimental result on mammals in history, a full 90% extension of life, visit myvitalc.com. That's myvitalc as in carbon.com.